Okay, let's just peek back with another video. Last night there was a new Sony State of Play that I watched, so I'm giving my thoughts on that. The last Sony State of Play did not go down well with me at all. In fact, it went down so badly with me, I decided to get rid of my PlayStation 5 altogether and get an Xbox instead. So it was dreadful. Like the last State of Play, I don't know what was going on with it. It was that one where they showed like 30 minutes of Concord and all these other really shit games I didn't care about. And it really was like my light bulb moment of like flipping heck. Like Sony don't have anything for the PlayStation 5 coming out that's remotely interesting to me. Well, a couple of things. Like Silent Hill 2 looked pretty good, I guess, but like nothing that really was like wow. And just to show it could be done, Xbox came out with a showcase that had almost every game in the showcase. I was like, wow, I want to play this game. So it did show that it's not like my expectations are so high that nothing they could have done would have impressed me. It's like it doesn't even need to be rocket science. It doesn't even need to be some huge game-changing game. It just needs to be something that's new, but looks like it's got something cool that I've not played before in a game. And that's as simple as it is for me. Like, if it's got something cool that looks like a cool gameplay mechanic that looks fun, I will be happy and go, that looks good, I will play it. So this State of Play, I had zero expectation. Really, I've got nothing invested in it anymore, not owning a PlayStation anymore. But a lot of the PlayStation fanboys were defending the last State of Play, saying, well, obviously they're not going to, show all the big games right now. They'll do that later in a set, there'll be another State of Play that will show all the big games that are coming out. And so by that reckoning, this State of Play should have been an absolute banger. This should have been an absolute, like the Xbox Showcase, like come out with like all these amazing games that they've not shown for ages, or stuff that they've had quiet under wraps that they've not revealed, which sometimes happens with Nintendo, right? They go dark on a game for ages, and all of a sudden you've got Mario Wonder, you've got a new Zelda, you've got these games that have just come out of nowhere, and it's like, oh right, okay, this is cool. But I wasn't really expecting that, but a lot of PlayStation fans I think were. They're expecting something like a Bloodborne remaster, or they're expecting like a new IP to come back that's been dormant for ages, or like a new like soccer game or a new Killzone or something. And I'm like, Sony are just so fucking shit right now. I didn't have any expectation about what was going to happen. And to be fair to State of Play, it wasn't the worst thing. There was at least one game here, which I looked really good, and I was like, that looks genuinely like a new cool thing. And it had these cool sort of like stop motion effects, like claymation feel to it. I can't remember what it's called, something with forest. I have to look up the name of it again. But that looked good, and I was like, oh man, I was starting to think, have I made a mistake getting a PlayStation 5, because that game looked great. And there was another game that also looked pretty good after that, so I was like, oh geez, these games are actually looking good. But then after that, it was just like, it wasn't dreadful, I'd say, but it was really mid. It was a really mid, like, showcase, and I'm like, well, you couldn't afford to have a mid showcase. You needed an absolute banger. You needed an absolute like the Xbox One, or even like the Nintendo Directs that we've had recently, where it's like something really great, right? Like not just, well, here's Horizon Forbidden West, a game that came out about 4 years ago that already looks beautiful on PlayStation 5. Here's a remaster of that with a tiny bit better fidelity because it wants to match it visually with Horizon Forbidden West. I was just like, really, like, PlayStation fans don't want this stuff. They don't care about these remasters and remakes of games that have just come out. Like, they want something that's not been around for a while. Like Bloodborne, like people are calling for. I'm not a Bloodborne fan myself, but oops, sorry, just gotta grab this. Oh, I'm not a Bloodborne fan myself, but people have been calling for 10 years. Oh, the game is 10 years old, the original Bloodborne PS4. And that's the kind of game that I can say, yeah, remaster that, remake that, or whatever, because even a full remake of that will be welcomed. Like, people being out of your hand if you did that, because there's so much demand for it. But again, Sony just aren't reading the room. They're not like on the ball with it, and they're just going, well, you want a Bloodborne remaster, so here's a remaster of Horizon Zero Dawn that nobody asked for. And they just need to stop these pointless remastered remakes. The same thing happened with Last of Us. Like, we'll rather have a new Last of Us game. We've got a remake of Last of Us 1, which is completely unnecessary. Like, the first game was absolutely brilliant. And at least with Last of Us 1, I can see there was quite a bit of a jump up. Because, yeah, the original game was PS3, so I guess there's a bit more of an understanding as to why you'd remake Last of Us 1. But remaking Horizon Forbidden West, a game, not Forbidden West, Zero Dawn, sorry. I get mixed up between the titles of those games. And I've not played either of them very much, so I would happily play the remastered one, obviously, because I've never played it before. But it's like for people who've already done that game, it's like, what's the point? This obsession with graphics and fidelity and all this stuff, they need to get over this because it doesn't make a freaking difference to the game, hardly. Yeah, maybe, like, I'm saying visual fidelity between one game and the next doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't bother me that I've said this before, but like, I love Metal Gear Solid 1, but the game looks like absolute shit. Like there's no denying it. It looks dreadful by today's standards, and the jump between Metal Gear 1 and Metal Gear 2 is massive. Like Metal Gear 2 looks like so much better, and I think, well, I'm happy. I don't need it to kind of. I mean, if you did a modern remake of Metal Gear Solid 1, I would obviously be like over the moon and like jumping up and down because I love that game to hell and back. But I don't need it like in another way. Like in another way, I'm like, well, the original game I still like, and it doesn't bother me that the graphics change so massively between 1 and 2. And the same thing with like Final Fantasy. Like it doesn't bother me that I can play like Final Fantasy 6 in like pixel art graphics and then jump to Final Fantasy 7 and it's 3D graphics. Like it's fine. It really isn't a problem because, as I said before, like graphics and graphic fidelity and whatever style the game has, within about 20 minutes, half an hour, you adjust to whatever that is, whether it's something that's amazing and looks beautiful, or like in 4K visuals and you can see every grain of grass on the field and stuff like that, or it's the opposite and you're just playing something that looks like, I don't know, Super Mario Brothers 1 on the NES or something. Like you don't really need to have great graphics anymore. And I think this is what consoles are just going down this dead end of like obsessed with detail in games. It doesn't make any difference. Like what? Oh, I can see a little blade of grass on the floor or something. I'm like, why is this such a big deal? Like, why does this even really matter? I just really feel that um, it's a pointless obsession with detail that isn't really helping anybody. It's making the games cost ridiculous amounts of money. It's making the games not profitable, and it doesn't make any difference really. Like years and years ago when gaming was much more primitive, like primitive 3D games. Like when they came out, yeah, they were revolutionary, looked great, but we could still look at it and go, "Well, that doesn't look amazing. It still looks good. It's 3D. It's new." But you can still see like textures looked a bit dodgy and things like the games still look rough. Is what I'm saying. Like we didn't look at them back then and go, "Oh, that looks amazing." Like, oh, it looks kind of rough, but it was the best we had, and it's all we had. So we got on with it. And when the graphics improved, it was a big deal because I'm like, well, it's a big jump. It's a big change. But unless something's changing in the gameplay, really, it's like it doesn't really make a difference. Actually, now I'm like, well, I think once we hit say the PS2 slash GameCube slash Xbox One era, it was like graphics and everything sort of leveled out a bit, and it was like, well, they're all pretty good. Like GameCube looked good, Xbox technically looked the best, PS2 looked pretty good, but all three of them looked. And ever since the PS2 era with all that stuff, I feel like graphics have become less and less of a thing. PS3 was a big improvement on PS2, but each one generation we go, it's less and less of a thing. But you're getting charged more and more for it. And even jumping to PS5 initially, I was like, it doesn't look so much different to PS4. Like it is definitely an upgrade. It's a visual upgrade you can see. But the other thing with this PlayStation Pro was PlayStation State of Play, so was where they were going to show loads of really cool stuff for the PlayStation 5 Pro. Like again, Mark Sony was going to come out and show all these great games and show all this stuff and really get people on board with paying £700 for a PlayStation 5 Pro. Apparently, this is what all the Sony fanboys were like predicting and all the like Access Media were sort of saying. And then like he comes out and he shows a load of old games but look almost no different to the original games on the PlayStation 5. Like, he shows like a sizzle reel, like, and I'm like, well, I'm sorry, I just can't see any difference in these games. Like, I'm sure if I was like to sit down and play it, I would notice a tiny difference. I'd probably be like, if I play Last of Us Remastered on a PS5 Pro, I'd probably notice like a 2% difference between playing that and playing Last of Us 2 Remastered on a regular PS5. But it's not enough of a jump to cost 700 freaking quid. Like, that thing should be £100 more than a base PlayStation 5 maximum. If it was like 600, right, over the original price of say 500, that'd be fine. I think everyone would be like, yeah, that's a fair enough increase. But to charge an extra 100 on top of that and all the other stuff, I've gone over before. I'm not going to go over the pricing of PS5 Pro, but it's like this really needed to get people going. Well, where's the game that you're showing on the PS5 Pro that people haven't played yet, that is new, that looks substantially better than the old one? Like, like they're showing Rebirth. I'm sure Rebirth looks great on it. And Rebirth is one that probably would benefit because the original did have quite a lot of weird stuff going on. But it's a game that came out in February. Like most people who were really fans of it have played it and done it and finished it this year. They're not really going to double dip and go back and spend another 90 hours on it just because it looks a tiny bit prettier. Like as I said, what they should have done is if they could have released a PS5 Pro, say back in February, in tandem with Rebirth coming out, even that would have been better because you would have had a great new exclusive PlayStation 5 game coming out, and you could have been like, the best way to play this is going to be on the PlayStation 5 Pro, and you'd be able to probably show a marked difference between that and the PlayStation 5, because that's probably one of the games where you would see a bit of a difference, and you haven't played it yet. So you would probably be like, yeah, I would maybe pick it up. Even if that's £700, some people would have been more enticed, I think. But to have nothing launched, like no game you can point to. I know Astrobot's just come out, but come on, Astrobot's not going to make any freaking difference on a PlayStation 5 or a Pro. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, well, where are the games? Like, it's just like a load of old games that everyone's already played. Like, what? So I don't think that's going to get anyone excited, if I'm honest. I really don't. And it was just really mid. Like, it wasn't dreadful. I don't think it was the worst state of play ever, but it was not as good as it needed to be. Like, it needed to have something that people are excited about or could come away really excited about. Like, Monster Hunter Wilds getting announced for next February was a surprise to me. I thought that game was years and years away. So it's nice to know, I guess, for Monster Hunter fans that it's coming out soon. I'm not really into Monster Hunter games. I've got, like, one on my Switch I've not even played yet, so I'd need to play that before I even think about another Monster Hunter game. It's got such a backlog of games, it's unbelievable. So, but yeah, I guess for long-term fans who love that franchise, who are passionate about it, it's a good bit of information to know that it's out soon. And then, like I say, it wasn't all bad. There were some interesting things. I thought it was good they've added Last of Us Part 1 Remake to the PlayStation subscription, which they should have done ages ago, to be honest with you. But then again, they've done it now. So that's good. And a couple of good games they're adding into the classics. Dino Crisis and what was the other one? I can't remember. But the classics catalogue is finally getting better. Like, I've always criticised PlayStation Premium's classics for being really shit and not having any of the really good games people want. But they've finally added a couple that people do want. Like, I'd love to play classic Dino Crisis again. So I mean, can't because I'm at PlayStation 5 right now. But I'm like, to be fair, that's a good move. Also, Pal World is a pretty good get. I mean, it's an old game now. It's been around since forever on Xbox and other platforms. But I guess, like, if you're PS5 only dude, it's probably good to give that a go. And it's free as well, so you don't need to pay for it, except maybe you do on PlayStation, because you have to pay for everything on PlayStation. But whether you do or don't, I don't know. But it's good that that's out, and it was out, like, today, so I'm like, well, that's good. Whenever they have an announcement, like, you can play this game now, or you can download it now, or it's coming out now, I'm like, that's pretty good. It's a nice little bump right after the thing where you're like, oh, I can go and play it now, great. Nintendo often do that as well. Like, the best one ever was Metroid Prime Remastered. Like, that was a good remaster that everybody wanted, that came out after years of people speculating over it. And then they were like, oh yeah, you can get it now. And I was like, holy crap, what? Like, it's out today? That was great. After all that time waiting for it. So yeah, I think that was good of Nintendo to do that. And they've done some great shadow drops this generation. Like, where they're just going to be like, oh, this game's out now. I was like, what? Okay, great. So, but Sony is just like, oh, well, where is the new stuff that really gets me excited? Like, there's a new Ghost of Tsushima coming out, which I guess is pretty cool. Like, again, for long-term fans of that franchise. I still haven't played the first Ghost of Tsushima yet. I do still want to at some point in my life because it looks amazing. So again, for me, I'm just like, well, I've got the first one to freaking play, so, and I don't know when I'll do that, not having a PlayStation anymore. So it's not a big deal for me, but I can see how that, I suppose, would be quite good. But even that, I don't think was enough to really get people going. Like, And I know that people hate on comments. I know that comments are usually flooded with negativity, so you can't take too much from the comments. But all the comments I saw on my live chat were absolutely slating for State of Play. Like, so many people calling for a Bloodborne remaster, lamenting the fact that we're getting remasters we don't want, but there's no games coming out. Everyone's like, where are the games? Sony, where are the games? This is what people have been saying all generation. And there's just nothing that's enough. Like, yes, the Silent Hill 2 remake looks really good, just as like I'm sure Resident Evil 4 remake looks really good, but neither of them were really needed. Like, you don't really need to remake Resident Evil 4, in my opinion. You don't really need to make Silent Hill 2, in my opinion. Just re-release the original game and remaster it, because he did do that a while ago, and the remaster was a bit shit. So I would just be remastering Silent Hill 2, and just bring it out, and just make it a better remaster than the last one. Like, you don't need to actually remake Silent Hill 2 at all. You don't need to remake, in my opinion, a lot of these games. I'm like, well, it's just not, enough. Like, it's not enough to get me super excited about a game that's relatively recently. That's when it on release, it was hailed an absolute masterpiece. It's like, why remake it again? Like, unless you're getting like an absolute 1-to-1 remake. Like, I think the Metal Gear Delta Snake Eater looks pretty good, but again, it's not something that I'm super pumped for because I have played that game many times. But at least it's come out on Xbox as well. And I'm a huge Metal Gear fan, so I'll definitely eat that up because Snake Eater is the best of all of them in a lot of ways. So yeah, I would get it, but it's still sort of like it's not got the sort of wow factor as if they actually released a brand new Metal Gear that looks amazing. Like that, I'd much prefer that over a remake of one that I played like 20 years ago, whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, I think maybe people as well. A lot of people were saying like, "Oh, it's time to get rid of PlayStation 5." Like switch to Xbox or just like PC gaming, whatever. Like, I feel like they are going to lose a lot of people this generation, and I think when PlayStation 6 launches, they're going to see it bomb. I wouldn't be surprised if PS6 is a bomb because there is a point. Yes, those hardcore people will pay fucking ridiculous amounts of money, will pay for it, and there's a certain snobbishness going on, like oh, you all just can't all too poor to afford a PlayStation 5 Pro, like all these dickheads being like, oh, well, you just can't afford it, stop moaning about it. It's like, no, that's a reasonable thing. Not everyone has got 700 quid for a freaking new console, which is ridiculous. And if you have got 700 quid, well, good for you, but at the same time, is that really good use of that 700 quid, even if you have it? Like, you'd be better off putting it towards either upgrading your PC or getting a PC for that price almost. So it's not so much about, oh, you can't afford it. It's more like, what are you getting for that amount of money? And if there's enough dickheads out there who are just like, oh, I'm going to get it just because and like get it for bragging rights, it's like, well, you're just an idiot, really, because it's not worth that money. It's not that you can't afford it. It's that what you're getting for that 700 quid is a minuscule upgrade that you couldn't even really barely notice whether you sat down and played the games next to each other. Like, I think, like I said about graphics not being a big deal, I do think frame rate is a big deal because that does affect gameplay. I was playing Star Wars Outlaws last night on the high quality settings. As soon as I got on like the speeder bike thingy and started running around, it looked choppy as hell, and I was like, "Oh, this looks horrible." And I immediately switched up to 60 frames a second. It looked great, and I'm like, "Well, yeah, that does definitely make a difference." And to be honest, even though everyone's like, "Oh, well, the graphics look more murky at 60 frames a second," I'm like, "Well, yeah, but when you're flying along on a speeder bike at like however fast trying to shoot dudes, and like you're not really watching the grass, you're not really going, oh, well, in the background that tree is in like it's a bit low definition. It's like you're not watching the detail in the game when you're playing a game like that. I mean, the only games that would really benefit from this added detail keep fucking going on about is, ironically, the gaming genre everyone seems to mock, which is like walking simulators. Like, I think if you were playing a walking simulator type game where it's a really slow paced thing where you're just sort of walking around, interacting with objects, interacting with things, that's the kind of game that could benefit from a huge graphical overhaul. Like something like Gone Home or something, like, or a newer version of that. Like, because you would actually notice, you would actually be able to take the time and like look over at all these different items. And again, other games that like something like a Skyrim game, an RPG style game, like that would be better as well, because again, those games are games where sometimes you do get immersed in it and you do have the time to sit and take in the detail, sit and take in the world, whatever it is. That is part of the appeal of those games. But if we're talking about anything else, it's just a general game, like a driving game, an action game, a beat 'em up game, whatever. Like, you're not spending forever like going, oh well, look at the fidelity of that. Like, I just think gameplay is king, and Nintendo are the only people who seem to understand this at the minute. I'm not saying Nintendo have always made great moves; they've made some dumb moves in the past, and still do sometimes. But I think at least with Nintendo, like, it shouldn't be the case that I come away from a Nintendo Direct for a Switch, which is like an 8-year-old system at this point. It's on its last legs, technically. But still, they come out with games that look fun. Still, I'm coming away from those directs going, oh, this looks good. There's still some great stuff coming out on the Switch. And yeah, it is a lot of remakes and remasters as well, but it's remakes and remasters, A, because it's right at the end of its life cycle, not halfway through like PlayStation 5 is, and B, the remasters sometimes look great because it's stuff I actually want to play. Like, that's locked on an old console somewhere that's not particularly like easy to get hold of, like Donkey Kong Country Returns, for example. That looks good. Like, I'm not going to go track down a Wii and use an awful controller on the Wii to play a Donkey Kong game. No, I would play it on a Switch with a proper controller, with tiny updated graphics, which again doesn't really bother me, the graphics so much. And the Wii being a standard def console, the game would now look really ugly as well. So to play Donkey Kong Country Returns is a substantial amount of faffing about. A, getting a Wii, B, getting an old copy of it, which would cost probably about the same as releasing it for now. To play a game experience, it's going to be substandard, it's not going to look as good, and to be honest, it's not going to play as good on an awful controller. Obviously, there was a good controller at launch for the Wii, so if you had that, I guess you're set to go. But it's like anyone who doesn't already exist and owns all that kit from back in the past is going to want to play the one on the Switch. So, and stuff like Dragon Age 3, like remaking that, that's a really old game. Dragon Age 1 and 2, like I tried to play the original, not Dragon Age, Dragon Quest, sorry. I tried to play the first Dragon Quest, and it's just too old. Like, I don't feel like the pixel art remasters, like with Final Fantasy games, where those still stand up well. I feel like the first Dragon Quest, I just was like, no, I'm not into this. I just can't get into it. So I would definitely play a remaster of those games because they're very old games, and it makes sense in a way. Because again, it's more about the gameplay, like modernizing those gameplay mechanics is a bigger deal than how it looks. And I just think this whole obsession with remakes, remasters, just lack of creativity, lack of interesting choices being made, and it's killing gaming. It's killing excitement. It's killing people's interest in getting a console. It's just like, well, you're killing this industry by not taking a chance on anything. It's just so like safe. This is why these remasters are so prolific on Sony's part. It's like, well, where are your new IPs? Where are your new games? Concord was an absolute bust. It's the biggest failure in PlayStation history. Not just PlayStation history, I think in video games. I can't think of video games as big a flop as that. And they needed something here to be like wow people and go, yeah, Sony has been on it. Sony has been hiding all these great games, and they haven't got anything. I don't think they've got anything apart from a couple of games that do look great, but they're not games still that would be like. There's nothing here that was on the level of, say, the Perfect Dark reveal with Xbox or the Gears of War reveal with Xbox. That's the level I'm talking about. I'm not just talking about a game that looks pretty good, that could be interesting to play. I'm talking about something big that actually people would just lose their minds over, that Sony used to regularly do. It's not like they've never done this. They used to be the absolute best at revealing, usually in E3, amazing games that look great. Like, I remember Arkham Knight reveal, the reveal of Final Fantasy 7 Remake for the first time, the reveal of Last Guardian when it finally came out after 10 flipping years of waiting for it. Really, really like hyped. I was super hyped. I remember watching those things like in the sort of excitement, and like the buffer, the thing would be internet connection would be shit, and like it would be buffering, and I'd be like desperately waiting for the next little bit of footage after it finished buffering. I was on the edge of my seat with those things. And these days I just sit and I'm just like, oh, okay. This looks pretty good. This looks shit. This looks okay. Another pointless remaster, whatever. I'm just like, they need to stop with these remasters, man. Like the ones that are choosing to remaster and remake. Give people what they want. Give them a Bloodborne remaster or remake, right? How many people are asking for that? Like, so many people are asking for that. And VR games, like, I suppose there was some couple of cool VR games here. Again, not for me because I don't own PlayStation VR, but people who do, I suppose it would have been a slightly better state of play for them. But overall, I'm going to say I think I maybe made a wise choice getting rid of a PlayStation 5 because there's nothing really on the horizon that really makes me think I made that bad decision overall. And some of those games, who knows, maybe they'll come to Xbox. There's even rumours that Final Fantasy games like Remake, Rebirth, possibly 16 will come to Xbox. But to be fair, I think even if it ever does happen, that is probably years and years and years away. I bet that's not going to be till like for another 3 years for us actually come out on Xbox if it ever happens. So I'm not expecting it to come out soon in this generation. So that's not a thing. But yeah, just mid. It was just a mid showcase. It wasn't a dreadful one. Wasn't bad for the last one, but it wasn't as good as it needed to be, considering how bad the last one was. They needed something much better than announcing a few remasters no one wants. A few games that look pretty good, but nothing mind blowing. And DLC announcements of games that are already out, which that's pretty cool. I mean, I like a DLC announcement, but it's not going to get people super fired up. Like extra concept for Astrobot's great, but it's not going to get people super fired up. And there's another one as well. I can't remember what it was. So like, oh, here's some DLC for this. So yeah, it's all right, but you needed something a bit more wow, like of a wow factor, And I think the closest thing we got to that was announcing a sequel to Ghost of Tsushima, which does look good. I still haven't played the first one, so for me again, I'm not like super bothered about that. But I guess that would be a good reveal for some people. But I still don't think it's enough, really. They needed several games, not just that, to kind of make it a great showcase that really people would then be like, get hyped for what's coming in PlayStation 5. And I honestly think, again, I don't know, because internet comments are always negative, aren't they? But it seems like there is a tonal shift of people going, I need to get rid of my PlayStation 5. Never mind upgrading to a freaking PS5 Pro. Like, what's the point of having my existing PS5? Like, what is coming out? Yeah, so anyway, that's my view on it. Just very mid, not awful, not great, and it needed to be better. And that's my video done.